Hello and welcome to my National Exam Prep channel. In this video, the topic is hazardous materials. We'll talk about what you need to know to pass your exam. Disclosure requirements, word associations, that'll be very helpful when you get into the exam. And other key exam information that you'll want to watch out for each of the hazardous materials we're going to discuss. Always remember, the goal of my channel is to help you pass your exams. So let's dig into hazardous materials and what you're going to see on the exam about these different materials. We'll talk about lead-based paint, some critical information here that's always on the national exam. Talk about asbestos, radon, mold, carbon monoxide, and a couple of acronyms at the end of the video. They'll ask you one or two questions about PCBs and CFCs. Let's start with lead-based paint, because you're going to see the most questions on your exam with regard to hazardous materials about lead-based paint. And as always, in each one of my videos, I recommend you grab a notepad and make some notes as you go along. It'd be much easier to refer to those notes before you take your exam with the key points you see on the screen here. So here's the first key exam point for the lead-based paint. It's going to be the date. Any house built before 1/1/78 falls into this category. And sellers are required to make many disclosures. The first one is what? What are they only required to disclose? Only required to disclose any known presence of lead-based paint. So that's the only thing the seller is required to disclose. They're also required to give any potential buyer a copy of an EPA pamphlet called Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. That pamphlet is required on the sale and listing of any property built before 1/1/78. So for the exam, what do sellers not have to do? Sellers do not have to remove any lead-based paint. Key point for the test, easy to get tripped up on it in the exam. Sellers are required to disclose, but they're not required to remove. The sellers are also required to give any potential buyer a 10-day period to inspect the home for lead-based paint. Mandated if the home was built before 1/1/78. That 10-day test period has to be included in each purchase agreement. Now, look at the last point down here. Does the buyer have to do the inspection? No. The buyer can waive the 10 days if they want to. So that's a key factor for the test. Seller is required to give the buyer a 10-day period to check and see if there's any lead-based paint, but the buyer may choose to waive that. Maybe it's a buyer who's going to do a lot of remodeling, and they might say to a seller, I don't care if there's lead-based paint. I'm going to do so much remodeling here. I'm going to tear most of the insides of the house out. So I want to waive the 10-day period just to move things along. So that is allowed. So there's some key facts there you want to make some notes of. Okay, let's move on to these three hazardous materials. Your test questions are going to be focused mainly around word associations. You'll need to know the basic information about each of these materials. For instance, regarding asbestos, you know it causes lung disease. You had in your other required education, it's only harmful if the fibers are friable. Remember that vocabulary word for asbestos. And that means if they're floating around in the air and they can be ingested into the lungs. But with regard to dealing with asbestos in properties, two methods. You want to remember these: abatement or encapsulation. Abatement just means removal, and encapsulation means sealing in place. So the question might be, if a property is going to be torn down, what's the best method for dealing with asbestos? That would be abatement. And abatement should be done by a licensed hazardous material professional. And there also is no federal disclosure law for asbestos. Radon, you know from your required classes, is a hazardous gas that comes up from underground. It's present everywhere. It always has been. But in the recent years, it's only become more harmful because homes are built so tight, okay? We're basically living inside a plastic bag now. Homes are wrapped in different materials, and now the radon gas, when it comes into a house, gets trapped. So what's the best way to deal with radon? For your exam, watch out for this term, mitigated. Radon is mitigated. That just means to soften the severity of, or lessen the severity of, by ventilating the radon gas outside. So radon is mitigated through a ventilation system. Some key points to remember for the exam. And then mold. Mold, we'll talk about that for a second. Mold needs to be remediated. Remediated, another synonym for remediation is removal. Mold needs to be removed and should be done by a licensed professional. Sellers are required to disclose any presence of mold that they know of. And also, there's no federal disclosure law for mold. So you'll see many questions along these lines with regard to your hazardous materials. There'll be questions like, all of the following statements about radon are true except. And one of the answers would be, there is a federal disclosure law. Well, that's not a true statement. So it would be the correct answer to an except question. It would be the one statement of the four that's not true. So watch out for how they address these on your exam. Now you will see one or two questions on these last two materials. So be aware, first of all, carbon monoxide is a product of combustion. If you have a forced air furnace that burns gas, if you have a water heater that's a gas appliance, there's a vent on the top of each one of those, and it moves that carbon monoxide outside of the house. But if the carbon monoxide gets into the house, it can be deadly. So what do you need to know for the exam about carbon monoxide? It is a product of combustion, that's one thing. Probably the most important thing is that on all federally related loans, say the buyer's going to get an FHA or a VA loan, carbon monoxide detectors will be required in each room of the house. So just be aware of that for the exam. The last two materials here are banned gases that actually harm the atmosphere, CFCs and PCBs. They may show up in the exam in the answer format. All of the following are banned gases, CFCs, PCBs. You want to look for those. I remember I'm not even going to try and pronounce the names. CFCs were the propellant in many hairspray and paint spray cans. That was banned years ago, harming the ozone layer. And PCBs are also banned gases that, if they're in the atmosphere, can be very harmful. Just know what they are. So if you want more exam information and insights on property disclosures, see my property disclosure full lesson video in the playlist on my channel. You can also find a full lesson video on each of the other 9 national exam topics. I have full lesson videos out there, and then short specific topic videos like this one on hazardous materials. So as always, my goal is to help you pass your exams. So if you like the videos, you can click the icon. Please feel free to share, subscribe, or comment on my videos. And I wish you great success on your exam and in your career.